The cursor blinks, mocking me. It sits there on a blank white screen where my balance should be. Zero. Not $0, just zero information. The bank website is different. The usual vibrant blues and greens replaced by a sterile, corporate gray. My login details, the same ones I've used for 7 years, since I built this business from a single desk and a dream, don't work. Panic, cold and sharp, jabs me in the ribs. Maybe it's a glitch. Systems go down. I try again. Password incorrect. User ID not found.
Impossible.
My hands start to tremble. The office around me, usually a symphony of clicking keyboards and hushed calls, feels silent, distant. My breath catches in my throat. I try the backup login. Denied. I try the link for forgotten passwords. My email isn't recognized. It's not a glitch. I've been erased. Locked out. My business account, the lifeblood of everything I've built, is gone. My husband, his face is the first one that flashes behind my eyes. A cold dread washes over me, chilling me to the bone. It feels like the world just tilted on its axis, and I'm sliding off the edge into a void I didn't know existed. If you've ever felt the ground disappear beneath your feet, tell me about it in the comments. I read every one. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Life was predictable, comforting. I had built my business from scratch. A marketing firm specializing in digital strategy. It wasn't glamorous at first. Late nights fueled by cheap coffee, rejection letters tacked to a corkboard as fuel, the constant hum of self-doubt buzzing in my ears. But I was good. I had an eye for what worked, a relentless drive, and a belief that I could create something real, something that mattered. Years bled into each other, each one adding a layer of polish, of stability, of success. The single desk became a small office, then a larger one downtown with a view of the river. Employees who believed in my vision, clients who trusted me implicitly. The business was my baby, nurtured and grown with every ounce of my energy and passion. It wasn't just a job. It was my identity, my proof that I could make my mark on the world. My husband, Mark, was comfortable. We met when the business was still small, still fragile. He was charming, easygoing, seemed genuinely proud of my ambition. He had a steady, if unexciting, job in finance. He handled our personal investments, the bills, the joint accounts. It made sense. My focus was entirely on scaling the business, on landing the next big client, on managing my team. He took care of the domestic infrastructure. It felt like a partnership. Different roles, but a shared goal of building a good life together. We lived in a nice house in the suburbs, planned hypothetical vacations we rarely took because I was always working, and talked about the future in abstract, pleasant terms. There wasn't grand romance, not really, but there was affection, mutual respect, a quiet companionship. Or so I thought. My life was a well-oiled machine. Early mornings at the gym, coffee on the go, into the office before anyone else, long days filled with meetings, strategy sessions, creative brainstorming. Evenings were often spent catching up on emails, or occasionally, a quiet dinner with Mark where we'd talk about our days, half listening, comfortable in the routine. Weekends were for catching up, laundry, maybe a quick trip to the market, always punctuated by the pull of my laptop. It was demanding, yes, but it was mine. Every success felt earned, every challenge overcome, a testament to my resilience. The business was thriving. We'd just landed a major national account, one that would double our revenue overnight. I was on the cusp of expanding, hiring new talent, maybe even opening a second office. I felt invincible, secure, grounded in the reality of my own making. I trusted Mark implicitly with our finances, our shared life. He handled the mechanics, the boring stuff. I built the empire. It was a fair division of labor, a foundation built on mutual understanding and support. He often joked about my money brain being focused elsewhere, that he'd handle the boring numbers so I could focus on the exciting ideas. I never questioned it. Why would I? He was my husband, my partner, the man who shared my bed, my home, my life. The thought that he could ever willingly bring harm to the life I'd so painstakingly constructed was beyond the realm of possibility. It wasn't just naive. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of who he was, or perhaps who he had become without my noticing. The day started like any other. Alarm at 5:30 a.m., the familiar chill of the morning air, the quiet drive to the office. I had a pitch deck to finalize for the new client meeting later that morning. I needed to transfer funds to a contractor, pay the monthly software subscriptions, clear payroll for the end of the week. Routine tasks, the kind I usually handled with a few clicks before 7 a.m. I logged into the bank portal, the one for the business account, and that's when the screen went gray. The login failed. User ID not found. Password incorrect. My heart stuttered. A technical issue, surely. I called the bank's customer service line. Endless hold music. When a representative finally answered, her voice was polite, detached. She couldn't find an account associated with my name or the business name. That was impossible. I gave her the account number. Long pause.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
That account, it appears to have been closed. Closed? How could it be closed? Who closed it? Account holder request. Ma'am, account holder? But I was the primary account holder, the business owner. Are you sure? Another pause. Yes, ma'am. And it seems the funds were transferred out before closure. Transferred out? My blood ran cold.
Who could do that?
Only I had signing authority. Unless someone else did. Someone who also had access. Someone who knew the passwords, the procedures. Someone who was connected. The world outside the office windows, the familiar skyline, suddenly felt alien, hostile. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking. Closed? Transferred? The words echoed in the sudden, terrifying silence of my office. It wasn't just a glitch. This was deliberate. A direct attack. But by whom? Who would gain? My mind raced, listing potential adversaries. A disgruntled former employee? A rival company? None of it made sense. No one knew the inner workings, the account details like I did. And Mark. He handled the personal finances, but he had access to the business account logins just in case. For emergencies. I called his cell phone. Straight to voicemail. I called his office. His assistant said he hadn't been in. A sick feeling began to curdle in my stomach. This wasn't an emergency where he couldn't answer. This felt like an emergency where he wouldn't. The silence stretched, filled only by the frantic beat of my own heart. The blank screen on my computer felt like a judgment, a void swallowing everything I had worked for. The initial shock gave way to a frantic scramble. I called the bank again, demanding answers, demanding to know who closed the account, where the money went. They were infuriatingly bureaucratic. Data privacy. Account holder rights. The account was closed at the request of an authorized signatory. Funds transferred to another account. They couldn't disclose details without that account holder's permission. Authorized signatory? It clicked. Mark. He was listed as an authorized signatory on the business account, a measure I'd taken years ago for administrative convenience, thinking nothing of it. He had signed something, requested the closure, and taken the money. My money. The business's money. I tried to call Mark again. His phone was off. I drove home, heart pounding in my chest. The house was empty. Too empty. His side of the closet was bare. A note on the kitchen counter, brief, clinical. He was leaving me, and taking everything liquid with him. The funds from the business account. The savings.
Gone.
Just like that. Along with him. And someone else. The note didn't say her name, but I knew. I'd seen the texts. The hush phone calls. The late nights at work that didn't involve work. A colleague, younger, blonder, who had always looked at me with a strange mix of pity and triumph. He hadn't just left. He had gutted my life. Financially crippled my business and destroyed our marriage in one swift, brutal act. The pain was physical, a searing agony that stole my breath. Betrayal on a scale I couldn't comprehend. The business ground to a halt. Payroll was due in 2 days. The national account contract needed a down payment to be signed. Suppliers were expecting invoices to be paid. My employees looked at me, confused, worried. I couldn't tell them the truth.
Not yet.
How do you tell the people who rely on you for their livelihoods that their boss's husband stole all the money and ran off with his mistress? It sounded like a bad Lifetime movie. I had to find a solution.
Fast.
I used my personal credit cards, racking up debt, to cover immediate expenses, to keep the lights on, to prevent a mass exodus of talent. It was a band-aid on a gaping wound. The numbers were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars vanished. The money wasn't just capital, it was the buffer, the security, the ability to operate. Without it, we were dead in the water. Lawyers. So many lawyers. Consultations that cost a fortune and offered little immediate relief. Divorce proceedings. Asset tracing. It all took time. Time I didn't have. My business was bleeding cash. Clients were getting nervous about delayed payments. The carefully constructed edifice was starting to crumble. Mark was gone. His lawyer was stonewalling mine. He claimed the funds were marital assets and he was entitled to them. Entitled? He had stolen them, leaving me with nothing but debt and a collapsing company. The injustice of it burned hotter than any flame. He was living it up somewhere, spending the money I had earned, the money that belonged to my business, while I fought tooth and nail just to survive. The challenges mounted daily. Suppliers cut us off. Creditors threatened legal action. My personal credit was maxed out. I was selling off anything of value, jewelry, art, even my car, just to make payroll for another week. The stress was immense, a constant, suffocating weight on my chest. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. My focus narrowed to survival. Forget expansion, forget growth. It was about keeping the doors open, keeping my employees paid, maintaining the illusion of stability while my world imploded. Mark seemed untouchable. He was gone, the money hidden, his lawyer playing defense. The legal system felt slow, cumbersome, designed for people with endless resources, not someone fighting for their professional life while being actively sabotaged. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. I was a skilled strategist, a problem solver. But this problem, it felt insurmountable. He had planned this, I realized.
Carefully.
Methodically. Waited until the new national account was secured, until the business was flush with capital, then struck. A calculated move to leave me with nothing, while funding his new life. The cruelty was breathtaking. He hadn't just taken the money. He had tried to erase me. Everything felt like it was slipping through my fingers. The national account, the one that was supposed to secure our future, was on hold. They couldn't risk working with a firm whose financials were in question. My best employees were starting to look for other jobs, their loyalty tested by the uncertainty. I saw it in their eyes. Fear, doubt, the quiet resignation that the ship was sinking. I couldn't blame them. I could barely keep my own head above water. Mark's lawyer sent a contemptuous offer, a pittance, in exchange for a quick divorce and me dropping any claims to the stolen business funds. It was an insult, a clear sign they thought I was beaten, that I was desperate enough to take whatever crumbs they offered. They were right about the desperate part, but they were wrong about the beaten part. Something inside me snapped. The despair that had been my constant companion was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wouldn't let him win. I wouldn't let him destroy everything I had built and walk away clean. I stared at the lawyer's offer, the cheap paper feeling like a taunt in my hand. My reflection in the office window looked gaunt, tired. But there was something new in my eyes.
Fire.
The fight wasn't just for the business anymore, or even for the money. It was for principle. It was for justice. It was for reclaiming my life from the wreckage he had made of it. I needed a new approach. The traditional legal routes were too slow, too visible, too easily countered by someone who had clearly planned their escape route with ruthless efficiency. I needed information. I needed to find where the money went. I needed someone who could operate outside the conventional legal framework, someone who could find what Mark thought was hidden. That's when I made the call. A name I'd been given by a sympathetic, world-weary contact in financial law. Someone who didn't just chase paper trails, but found the people who left them. A private investigator. Not the kind who staked out cheating spouses, though I suppose that was part of it, but the kind who specialized in financial forensics, in tracking assets across borders, in finding the invisible threads that connect money to its owner, no matter how deep they tried to bury it. His name was Frank. His voice on the phone was gravelly, non-committal. He listened patiently as I poured out the truncated, raw version of the story. My husband. Business accounts frozen. Money gone. Mistress.
Offshore.
The word hung in the air.
Offshore.
A place where money went to disappear. He asked few questions, but they were sharp, incisive. Details I hadn't considered significant. Names, dates, habits, vulnerabilities. By the end of the call, I felt a sliver of hope, thin but potent. He didn't promise miracles. He promised to look, to see what he could find. It was a gamble. I was paying him with the last of my emergency funds, money I desperately needed for the business. But it felt like the only path left. The conventional roads were blocked. I had to go off-road. I had to fight dirty because Mark had fought dirty first. This was no longer about salvage, it was about retaliation. About ensuring that if I went down, I wouldn't go down alone. The fear hadn't vanished, but it was now tempered by a cold, quiet rage. Frank worked in the shadows. I barely heard from him. A cryptic text here, a brief, uninformative email there. He needed more information, he said, about Mark's past,
His family.
his habits, anything that might reveal a pattern, a connection. I dug deep, revisiting parts of our shared history I wanted to forget. His brief stint working for a company with offshore branches. His fascination with international markets. The time he joked about wanting to live somewhere the IRS couldn't find him. What I had dismissed as idle chatter now seemed like pieces of a puzzle, carefully laid out for anyone observant enough to see. I passed it all to Frank. Every detail, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. Meanwhile, the crisis deepened. My largest client pulled their contract. We couldn't deliver. It was a death blow. I had to let people go. Employees who had been with me for years, who had trusted me. Telling them was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Their faces, a mixture of understanding and despair, haunted my nights. The office, once buzzing with energy, felt like a tomb. Empty desks, silent phones. The dream was dying. Creditors were relentless. Final notices. Threats of lawsuits. The bank was moving to foreclose on the business loan. I was out of money, out of options, drowning in debt and despair. Mark's lawyer sent another message, even more condescending than the last. They were ready to finalize the divorce. My silence was taken as acceptance of their paltry offer. They thought they had won. They thought I was broken. I sat alone in the empty office, the setting sun casting long, desolate shadows across the floor. The silence was deafening. It was over. I had fought, but I had lost. He had taken everything. My business, my financial security, my belief in shared futures. He was probably sunning himself on a beach somewhere, laughing, while my life lay in ruins. The bitterness was a physical taste in my mouth. I had nothing left to lose. Not really. My lawyer was advising me to declare bankruptcy, to walk away, start over. The thought was crushing. It felt like admitting defeat, surrendering to the man who had systematically dismantled my world. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. It was Frank. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I found it, he said.
Just like that. Offshore.
Nevis. Took some doing. Layers of shell corporations, dummy names. But the money trail led there. All of it. The business funds, the joint savings. Everything liquid he could get his hands on. My breath hitched. Nevis. A tiny island known for its opaque financial privacy. Can they get it back? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It's not about getting it back, Frank said. Not directly. Not quickly. But offshore accounts, for all their secrecy, are still tied to individuals. And individuals can be targeted. Legally, he explained. There were international agreements, specific legal maneuvers that could be employed against funds held in certain jurisdictions, especially when they were tied to ongoing legal proceedings like divorce and asset division, and especially when there was a strong case for fraudulent transfer and intentional harm to a business. It wasn't simple, not guaranteed, but it was possible. A lever. A way to exert pressure. He had gathered the evidence. The specific account details, the names on the shell corporations, the proof that Mark was the beneficial owner. It was all there. A digital footprint he thought he had erased, but Frank had followed the faint thermal residue left behind. Hope, fragile and sharp, pierced through the layers of my despair. It wasn't about getting the money back immediately. It was about control. It was about turning his greatest weapon against him. He had used the secrecy of offshore accounts to hide his loot and render himself untouchable. But Frank had found the hidden key. Now, I could become untouchable. I could strike where he was most vulnerable. His money. His security. The very thing he had betrayed me for. The final phase was set in motion with the quiet precision of a hunter laying a trap. Frank provided the documentation to my lawyer, a different lawyer this time, one who specialized in international asset recovery and wasn't afraid of aggressive tactics. We didn't make a sound. No threats, no warnings, no grand pronouncements. The legal filings were initiated quietly, targeting the specific entities Frank had identified in Nevis. Freezing orders. Injunctions. Requests for disclosure that, if ignored, carried severe penalties. It was swift, silent, and went straight for the jugular. Mark had been expecting me to fight him over the house, over alimony, over the scraps he had left me. He was prepared for a long, drawn-out battle over visible assets. He was prepared for me to beg, to plead, maybe even to accept his pathetic offer out of desperation. He was not prepared for this. For his hidden treasure to be unearthed. For his escape hatch to be sealed shut. I sat by the phone, the office still and quiet, the air thick with anticipation. It wasn't revenge I craved, not exactly. It was balance. Justice. The feeling of reclaiming agency, of taking back the power he had stolen. My lawyer had instructed me to simply wait. The process was underway. The legal system, for all its flaws, was now moving with a chilling efficiency, armed with the precise information Frank had provided. It wasn't a negotiation. It was an ambush. Then the phone rang. It wasn't my lawyer. It was an unknown number. Again. I hesitated, then answered. A frantic, panicked voice.
Mark.
I had blocked his number months ago, but he was calling from a different one. He sounded wild, unhinged. "What the hell did you do?" he screamed, his voice raw with disbelief and rage. "My accounts. They're frozen. Everything. Nevis. How did you find it? What did you do?" His composure, the smooth veneer he always wore, was completely shattered.
He was blindsided.
Utterly, completely blindsided. The carefully constructed fortress of his hidden wealth, the foundation of his new life, had crumbled without warning. He hadn't known. The legal filings had hit the banks first, the freezing orders effective immediately, before any notice could reach him through his usual channels, before his Nevis lawyers could react. "You froze everything," he shrieked, the panic evident in his voice. "The money for the apartment. The car.
My
life. My new life," he meant. The one he had built on the ruins of mine. I listened, a strange calm settling over me. His panic was a balm to my own bruised spirit. He had thought himself so clever, so untouchable. Hiding the money offshore, leaving me destitute. He had underestimated me. He had underestimated the lengths I would go to fight back. "You left me with nothing, Mark," I said, my voice low, steady. No shouting, no anger, just a quiet statement of fact. "You took everything. My business. My money. You tried to destroy me." There was a beat of silence on the other end, perhaps expecting hysterics, tears, accusations. Not this quiet, cold certainty. "This is what happens," I continued, the words measured, deliberate. "When you burn someone's world down, don't be surprised when they stand in the ashes and learn to use the fire." He sputtered, raged, threatened. But the power was gone from his voice, replaced by the raw terror of a man who had just discovered he was trapped. The leverage had shifted, completely, irrevocably. He wasn't untouchable anymore. He was exposed. And the money he had stolen, the money he thought was his untouchable prize, was now the weapon in my hand. I hung up the phone, the dial tone a quiet, final sound. The fight wasn't over, not entirely. There were still legal battles ahead. But the core victory was mine. The days that followed were a blur of legal maneuverings. Mark was desperate. His frozen assets meant he couldn't fund his new life, couldn't pay his expensive lawyers, couldn't even access basic funds without petitioning the court. The tables had turned with a vengeance. The money he had stolen to escape and build a new life was now being used as leverage against him. His mistress, I heard, wasn't quite so keen on the new life when it came with frozen assets and potential legal entanglements. Relationships built on stolen money tend to dissolve when the money disappears. He was forced to negotiate, not from a position of strength, but from one of complete vulnerability. We reached a settlement. It wasn't a simple transfer of funds back to my account. Offshore legal processes are complex and slow, but it was a complete capitulation on his part. The stolen business funds were acknowledged as belonging to the business, not marital property. He agreed to a repayment plan, secured against other assets he had foolishly thought were safe. He signed away any claim to the business, to the house, to anything substantial. The divorce was finalized, swiftly and cleanly. He was out of my life, financially and emotionally, leaving behind only the debris of his betrayal and the unexpected strength it had forced me to find. The business is slowly recovering. The national account eventually came back to the table, seeing the decisive way I had handled the crisis, perhaps even respecting the fight I had put up. I hired back some of my employees, the ones who had waited who still believed. The office feels different now. Leaner, maybe. Wiser, certainly. The financial scars run deep, and the emotional ones, they may never fully heal. The trust is broken, irrevocably. But the fear is gone, replaced by resilience. I built this business, once from nothing. I could build it again, even from ruins. I learned that sometimes, the most devastating blows can reveal the most hidden strengths. I learned that betrayal, as painful as it is, doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the catalyst for a new beginning. A colder, harder beginning, maybe, but one where you stand on your own 2 feet, having fought back and won. The money is coming back slowly. The business is growing again carefully. And Mark? I haven't seen him, haven't spoken to him. His screams on the phone that day are the last sound I heard from him. He thought he was leaving me with nothing. He was wrong. He left me with the chance to prove I could rise from the ashes he made.
And I did.
If this story of fighting back resonated with you, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, doing so helps bring more of these stories to life. Thanks for being here.